Say that this evening's presentation here, United Lodge of Theosophists Day, is given by Mr. Wes Ammerman and also by Hal Rosenblatt. So we're very, very fortunate to have them with us. All right, so before we get started, a reading. This is by Mr. Robert Crosby, founder of United Lodge of Theosophy. Truth is not a man, nor a book, nor a statement. The nature of truth is universal. Its possessors, in any degree, will be found to be appliers of universality in thought, speech, and action. Their efforts will be for humanity regardless of sex, creed, caste, or color. They will never be found among those claiming to be the chosen spokesman of the deity and exacting homage from their fellow men. True brotherhood includes the least developed as well as the very highest. We must seek to give aid to all in search of truth. Our value and aid in this great work will be just what we make them by our motive, our judgment, our conduct. ULT is a name given to certain principles and ideas. Those who associate themselves with those principles and ideas are attracted and bound by them only, not by their fellows who do likewise or who refrain or who cease to consider themselves so bound. The declaration with its signature by the associates is a wide departure from anything that exists. We give you Wes Ammerman and Hal Rosenblatt.
Well, welcome, friends. Theosophy teaches that there is a great body of advanced human beings we call the masters of wisdom. They are the fulfillment of human evolution. They have great powers and knowledge. They know each other and can communicate with each other, whether they're in a body or out of it. They watch over the progress of the earth and all the beings in it with special attention to us, their younger brothers, humanity. They try to help in various ways. Primarily, they come to the world as messengers, giving a portion of their great truth. That portion that would be appropriate to the cycle, to those particular people that they're addressing, and their needs. What is that body of wisdom that they teach? It's not a religion, but it's the source of all religions, called the wisdom religion. Another name for it is theosophy, or literally divine wisdom. This ongoing attempt by the masters to inculcate and disseminate the true principles of life we refer to as the Theosophical movement. Buddha was part of that movement. Krishna, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Moses, Muhammad, Jesus, all from that great fraternity of perfected beings, all giving out portions of that same great wisdom. The most recent presentation of that wisdom came at the last quarter of the 19th century with the work and writings of the messenger H.P. Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, or HPB, along with her incredibly capable and wise co-worker, William Q. Judge. At the heart of this modern presentation of theosophy are three fundamental ideas. Briefly stated, these are: first, the unity of all life. All life comes from the same source. All of life will return to that same source. All of life is that source at heart. Therefore, we are all united. We are all one great beingness at our hearts, in our hearts. Brotherhood is a fact in nature, though we have not realized it in our hearts and minds yet. The second idea is that everything in life proceeds according to cycles, as we see in the cycle of waking and sleeping and waking, of breathing in, breathing out, and breathing in again. Cycles are everywhere. Two particularly important cycles are those of karma and reincarnation. Karma is the cycle of cause and effect. Every cause brings about its inevitable consequences, effects, and leads to new causes. Reincarnation is the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. We are all immortal souls inhabiting a mortal body. We give up that body, rest, and take on a new one. The immortal soul persists. The bodies fall away, and we take another in turn. The third fundamental idea has to do with evolution. All of life is engaged in evolution. All of life consists of innumerable sparks of immortality on an obligatory journey through various forms. This evolution is not only a physical phenomenon, it is on all the planes of life. It occurs on the astral plane, on the psychic plane, on the emotional plane, on the mental plane, on the moral plane. Evolution involves our whole being. When evolution is accomplished, we have a master of wisdom. That is our destiny. The work of the United Lodge of Theosophists, or ULT, is to disseminate and exemplify these and allied ideas. Why is this important? Because, as Plato says, ideas rule the world. Thought is the causal plane of action. As we think, so we feel. As we think and feel, so we act. And as we act, we create our destiny. Wrong thoughts, mistaken thoughts, and ideas lead to discordant feelings to discordant actions, and from those proceed all the horrors of life that we're familiar with: the disease, the war, the famine, the pollution, from all stemming ultimately from wrong ideas. Right ideas, true ideas lead to concordant feelings, leading to concordant actions, leading to peace, harmony, beauty, and all that is good in life. It all comes from ideas in the mind, the ideas that we hold. As we think, so we are. Therefore, what can be more important than inculcating those right ideas? Theosophy is the quintessence of right ideas, and ULT is in the world to disseminate them and exemplify them. How does ULT accomplish this mission? It has several unique approaches to its work in accomplishing its goal. We have the approach of unity. We have the approach of focus on the work. We have the approach of true authority. We have the approach of self-reliance. We have the approach of impersonality. We assert that all these approaches grow organically out of the fundamental ideas of Theosophy. They are logoic expressions of inner principles. They lead to concrete manifestations on the outer plane. From within, without. This is the ULT way. So let's look at each of these approaches and see how they work. First, the approach of unity. This grows directly out of the first fundamental principle of Theosophy, that we are indeed already all united. We are all one. We are the same in our heart of hearts. We are already brothers and sisters. This leads also to the first object of the Theosophical movement, which reads, to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. We find this approach indicated also in the ULT Declaration. The ULT Declaration is the only document of ULT. It was formulated by Robert Crosby as he initiated the United Lodge of Theosophists back in 1909. He created it out of fragments of writings from his teacher, Mr. Judge. He took lines from it and put together a remarkable, simple, direct, concise statement of intentions for the United Lodge of Theosophists. And in that declaration, it speaks of striving for a truer realization of the self, and that self with all capital letters, meaning the self of all, the spiritual self, which is alike in all of us. A truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. This is related to the dissemination of the theosophical ideas as its work. And it shows the idea of brotherhood, that we are all one, that we're here to realize that more and more. The Declaration also speaks of working in the furtherance of unity. So how does ULT manifest this approach? It is entirely non-sectarian. It is international. There are lodges all over the world, different continents. It's open to everybody. As we heard in the first object, it's open to people of all different races and denominations, and whether, no matter their beliefs and race, everybody is welcome because we're all one. It manifests itself also in its encouragement to work in harmony with each other. Emphasis on kindness, consideration of others, listening to others, putting others before oneself, not finding fault with others, encouraging others' efforts, and all that positive looking actions and feelings. In short, it encourages what Robert Crosby often says is the goal, to act for and as the self of all, the higher self of all. That is the approach of unity. What about the second approach of the focus on the work? Again, that work is the dissemination and exemplification of the teachings of Theosophy as recorded in the writings of HPB and Mr. Judge. After they left the body, HPB and Mr. Judge, they and their teachings were sidelined. Other people were vying for power to try to replace them, to follow them, to follow in their place, and in a terrible game of personalities. Also, the literature, the theosophical literature, Much of it was out of print, difficult to come by, sometimes re-edited and distorted. Robert Crosby and a few friends established the United Lodge of Theosophists to restore the modern theosophical movement to its original lines. They said, let's put HPB and Mr. Judge up front and center where they belong. These are the true teachers, and their writings are the true teaching. That is the focus. So this approach is the focus on that work, the dissemination of the original teachings as recorded by the original teachers. According to this approach, ULT has several very important concrete tasks. First, to publish the literature in the original form. Then, make it available to people who are interested in discovering it and studying it. Then, to establish an education program to spread broadcast the truth teachings through local lectures and study classes and international programs. The next approach is that of the true authority. The Declaration of ULT states that it has no constitution, no bylaws, or officers. It has no leaders in the sense of authority. How are decisions made? Conference, to arrive at consensus through mutual discussions. At ULT, all students are fellow students struggling to learn and grow. At ULT, the true authorities are, first, HPB, Mr. Judge, and the masters behind them. Second, the theosophical literature, primarily that of HPB and Mr. Judge. Third, the ULT Declaration. Fourth, our own higher self. Last thing we want to say about that is that even HPB herself was humble about her role as a leader. She said, "Do not follow me, nor my path. Follow the path I show, the masters who are behind." Next, we have the approach of self-reliance. This grows directly out of the third fundamental principle of theosophy. All beings are engaged in a great journey of evolution. All beings are journeying through various forms, starting in the very simple, basic forms, mineral forms, through the plant and the animal, into the human and beyond. In the lower kingdoms, we proceed by natural impulse. When we reach the human stage, we proceed by, we develop self-consciousness, we have moral responsibility, and we proceed according to self-induced and self-devised efforts, which is another word for self-reliance. We evolve according to self-reliance. We have to learn to rely on ourselves and not others for the answers, for direction, for guidance. The idea occurs in the Declaration, where it speaks of our evolution in terms of achieving a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood and a greater realization of the self. It also, even more so, later on in the Declaration, it speaks of us having to make ourselves fit by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. There's two things there. There's study and there's the otherwise. We are to be self-reliant about both of those. Self-reliant study means using our own judgment and discrimination to realize the truth for ourselves, not just to repeat formulas and definitions, but to actually strive to have a comprehension, a realization at some level of the truth of these ideas. The otherwise is wonderfully vague, to wonderfully open for us to interpret and apply for ourselves in a self-induced and self-devised way. It means putting these truths into action, and we too are to choose how we are to do that. It could be in any number of ways: service in our community, service at the lodge, taking assignments, memorizing passages from the devotional books, visiting a neighbor in need. There's endless ways in which we can apply the truths that we learn to our everyday lives. And in doing so, there's a card that associates sign when they wish to become associates of the lodge. It ends with the idea that there's no obligation other than that which I myself determine. We are the determiners of how we are to proceed in our application of these truths. One other thought about self-reliance. The opening lines of the declaration are, "The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy." Independent devotion. That means ULT depends on no other entities. It depends on no religion, no government office, no private organization, no university, no grants. It relies on itself. It proceeds and subsists and survives by one means only: voluntary contributions, either in time or money or effort. Lastly, we have the approach of impersonality. This too grows out of the teachings of Theosophy. What is the self? We could say that we are actually three selves. We are a universal self, we are an individual self, and we are a personal self. The universal self is the Atman, the one undifferentiated spiritual reality that is at the core of all of our beings, making us all one. There is no difference in the universal self of one being and another. It's all the same one universal self. The individual self is the immortal soul, the reincarnating ego, that which we bring from, that persists from life to life to life, our immortal self, growing, evolving towards the goal of realization. The personal self is our lower instruments that we use in any one life. That's our physical body, our astral body, our emotional nature, our lower mental nature, our desires and passions. All this lasts for a single life. That's our personal self, which we also call our personality. It survives for only a single life. It comes from the Greek word persona, meaning mask. It's a mask our immortal self wears for a lifetime, and then we take it off again. We are not our personalities. We are struggling to discover ourselves as our individualities. Eventually, we'll have to renounce that and define ourselves as our universality. But first, let's try to sever our identification with the personality. The approach of impersonality in ULT is to relinquish our hold on our personality and cleave hold to our individuality, our immortal self, and that of all others. It's not an attempt to be cold or indifferent or lifeless. It's an attempt to subjugate the lower for the higher. This manifests itself in various concrete ways. When Theosophy magazine existed, for ULT's magazine arm. The articles written by the students and writers were not given. They were anonymous, except those repetitions of the articles by HPB and Mr. Judge. And things like that, putting aside the lower nature as much as possible, trying to identify with the higher. The idea was to reduce I, me, and mine, to get ourselves out of the way, to let Theosophy speak through us. There's a story about Krishna. Radha, who was the chief of the gopis, those were the cow herders, the female cow herders who were devoted to Krishna. Radha one day was watching Krishna play on his flute, and she says she was eyeing the flute very jealously, and she says to Krishna, "What did that flute do to deserve the blessing of being touched by your lips hour after hour?" And Krishna took the flute from his lips and showed her the inside of the flute and said, "Look, it is entirely empty, so I can freely fill it with my divine song." So these approaches, unity, focus on the work, authority, true authority, self-reliance, impersonality, these help ULT achieve what the Bhagavad Gita teaches, the right performance of action. Doing the right action, which is to disseminate and exemplify the teachings of Theosophy, in the right way, wisely, selflessly, eventually, karmalessly. As long as ULT, collectively as a lodge and as individual aspirants, strives for universal brotherhood, maintains a laser-sharp focus on the fundamental teachings, steers clear of attention-stealing distractions, stays loyal to the true teachers and the true teachings, guards against dogmatism and stultification of ideas and methods, remains open to new and potentially helpful methods of work, strives to act for and as the self of all, it will remain a beacon light of divine truth for all seekers to look to for inspiration and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. It's a wonderful survey of the philosophy and the ideals of ULT. When you had a couple of readers, or did you want me to read them?
It'd be the J.
Great.
Hello.
Appreciate it.
This is also from Robert Crosby. Let
Yes.
ULT flourish on its moral worth alone. The work we have to do, the knowledge we have to give out, depends on no other names than those of the true teachers, HPB and WQJ. Associates must learn to look to them, to point to them, and to the masters whom they served. Nothing else will restore the movement. Unity is the keynote of our attempt, and the living persons, if made prominent, will detract from that attempt. Theosophy does not emanate from any society nor any living persons. So far as the world and all of Theosophists are concerned, Theosophy comes from HPB and WQJ, or rather through them. So, to avoid misconceptions, we get back of living persons to the message and the messengers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken, do you mind? I think you're the next guy up. Yeah. Would it be a clear? You can just read right out of that. Our third reading of the day, it should never at any time, nor should any of our policies and practices degenerate into hard and fast conclusions as to men, things, or methods of work. If we stand true and steadfast as to our aims, purpose, and teaching, we will afford such aid and guidance as is in our power to all who may inquire, and the necessary arrangements will shape themselves. We have but to keep continually in mind and heart the original lines laid by HPB and WQJ, William Quinn Judge, namely unity first, as a focus for spiritual growth and mutual strength. Study that a knowledge of the movement, its purpose, its teachers, and its message may be had. Work upon ourselves in the light of that study and for others, first, last, and all the time. And that's from Robert Crosby in the beginning, from the Friendly Philosopher, page 380 and 381.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Wow. We've had a wonderful overview of the Theosophical philosophy and some of the highlights of the work of ULT. And the ideals have been well expressed. But, as HPB noted in her first work, Isis Unveiled, we do give preference to the ideal and not the form. And yet, she also says that altruism was not a matter of high ideals, but a matter of practice. So really, the question is, how well do these ideals work out in practice? It would seem that given the necessity for the integrity of the individual mind, it's natural to ask practical questions. What is this thing called the United Lodge of Theosophists? This strange hybrid. It's neither organization, nor a society, nor a club. We had a friend ask one time, well, who's in charge anyway? Where are your leaders? How in the world can you not have a leader? And how do you survive without fees or dues or memberships? These kinds of questions are often asked by newcomers and Theosophists alike. So how we answer really kind of brings to light some of the challenges and opportunities that ULT presents to us. So I'd like to approach it in three ways and come to a few very tentative conclusions. A few of the features of ULT. I'd like to say something about what is a lodge. I'm going to just stay with this slide here for a little bit. And what are our methods and how well do they work? Now, our reading had just said earlier that Crosby wrote that ULT was a name given to certain principles and ideas. So, never meant to be an organization. It's not a or the Theosophical Society. Very decentralized. And it's true, we don't have dues, fees, or memberships. And ULT owns no property. Each lodge is autonomous, but hopefully we keep in touch with the other lodges. Students often work with other theosophical groups, other lodges, and Theosophists, the world in general. It sounds simple. It's really actually quite revolutionary, quite unusual. Here we have a picture of one of our ULT lodges. It's one I happened to run across not too long ago. It's in Bengaluru, which is a city in southern India. And it's a building, but is it a lodge? I think the question we fairly could ask is, what is a lodge? Is it just a building? Is it a place? In fact, let's think about maybe something that some students may not be aware of. Where did students first meet? Well, in Crosby's day, and we're going back 100 years and more, private homes. They then met in restaurants when they grew out of somebody's living room. They ran out of rented space. They met in maybe when they ran out of a dining room. Next slide up, Jonathan, if you would. Here you are. This dining room that happens to be in the Czech city of Prague, but I thought it looked close enough like a dining room in Los Angeles 100 years ago, where students met. And when they ran out of dining rooms, they rented a space or eventually built or bought some property. It was kind of an organic process. So we look at a building and we say, well, that's the lodge. Well, is it the building? Is it a website? Is it the books? Can we go back to the other slide, Jonathan, just for a moment? Is it the building here? Or is it the ideal? Is it just a dining room? I think it could be all of these things. Perhaps a working definition for a lodge would be it's a focus for work, a sort of vehicle, maybe in an analogous way to the body of a human being, but not exactly the same either. I think it's interesting to compare two indirectly related words. Those words are lodge and logos. Now, they come together with interesting parallels. The words may sound similar, lodge, logos. But they have different origins, different meanings, and yet they kind of together give us a sense of ULT. Logos, from the ancient Greek logos, meaning the manifested deity or outer expression of an idea. Such as Blavatsky says in her glossary, speech is the logos of thought. And the term lodge is actually from the Old French or German word logia, meaning shelter. So we put these two together and we can kind of say, well, the lodge, the logia, shelters the logos, the manifestation of the word of the ancient wisdom. So perhaps we could conclude that any useful location, any logia, whether in physical or in cyberspace, say an internet website, would constitute a lodge. Our meeting today, this meeting earlier, in a sense, are lodge meetings. They're not in buildings or not only in buildings, but they serve a function of providing a focus for work. So I'll look a little bit at some of the features, how lodges work or don't work. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Jonathan, I want to put up the next slide if you would. There we go. Mr. Crosby uses a great analogy. He said, and I didn't get it into one of the slides, I wish I had, but he says, all that any of us can give is theosophy. We didn't invent it. It was given to us. We stand in line and pass it along as people used to do at fires and passing the buckets of water. So maybe that's kind of the important focus here. If we focus on theosophy and helping other minds to understand it, it might help remove the focus on ourselves and make us a little less likely to claim any authority for it. As Hal wonderfully indicated, they're really the source of authority is really in the teachings as teachings and in the individual's own understanding about what those teachings are. We can't divorce those two. Now, in The Voice of the Silence, Blavatsky says that the self of one is the self of all. So they're really that teaching, the teachers, our highest nature, our highest spiritual nature, are the source of these ideas. They're universal. And therefore, the authority is in the ideas and our understanding of them. So perhaps the question is, like these firefighters illustrated here, how efficient are we at passing buckets of water? So this kind of brings me to a bit of an analysis of ULT and a little bit of knowledge of some of the lodges and how we work. What do we do well and what don't we do well? And so among our strengths when we do things right, as Hal indicated, we keep the focus on theosophy. We avoid any kind of authority and let the teachings, let the ideas speak for themselves. Perhaps at our best, ULTs serve as a school of theosophy. We try to avoid promoting individual personalities, but yeah, it still happens. We're human. We also don't promote our own interests, but if we do, it's probably, we could say it's human to do so. At our best, we encourage individuals and individual initiative and provide opportunities for students to work. And perhaps another, often maybe unstated strength might be that we don't hold property, we don't hold money or investments as ULT, because those things take the focus off the public work, off our inner study, off the focus on theosophy. Now, I mentioned a few strengths. What do we not do well? Now, this may well depend on our own perspective or the perspective of someone asking a question about us, but list a few things that we kind of have trouble with sometimes. One is that we might appear to be dogmatic if we focus just on Blavatsky and Judge's works. I don't know if that's a strength or just an observation on an essential characteristic of ULT. There are other theosophic groups, and they all would say they have their place, they have their history, they have their purpose. And we could perhaps say, let's let them do their job, what they do well, and we'll try to focus on what we know how to do. So a common criticism, probably fair, we're a bit slow to change methods. Anybody remember lodges before COVID and the internet? we kind of got forced to do what we're doing here. Use a cyberspace, use Zoom as a meeting ground. But as the previous one of the readings said, that Crosby indicated the best method is a combination of all methods. So perhaps we need to learn how to use methods better, and perhaps also learn how to delegate better. One idea I heard years ago that ULT and Theosophists are really too intellectual. And often there were two things that were meant by that. One was that we were using too many Sanskrit terms. That's probably true. The other was that, we talk a lot and perhaps don't do collective service work and so forth. The difficulty is that there are very few places one can go to learn about theosophy and to talk with other students and to ask questions and to kind of gain the collective leverage of working together. So I don't know if that's really a weakness or just a statement that ideas matter, as Hal pointed out in his remarks, that ideas rule the world. That goes back to Plato. And it's really true. The ideas we hold do matter. One thing that comes up from time to time is that in that ULT declaration, which we'll read in just a few minutes, we don't have mechanisms to avoid dissent. There's no methodology or method to keep people in line, accept that declaration. And perhaps a corollary problem with that is we don't particularly organize large functions or collaborations with other groups. Now, this may just be characteristic rather than a weakness, but I think these kinds of problems have to be worked out and as we go along, because there are no formal guidelines about what we ought to do. It kind of goes along with the idea we mentioned earlier that there's no obvious leaders in ULT. There are no lodge presidents, nobody in charge, and so sometimes it's kind of hard to get projects going. And perhaps the greatest weakness, perhaps, is in any endeavor, and particularly in an association of students, is that when we fail at our strengths, when we do things well, we're okay. When we don't do the things that we know best or do best, then perhaps it may be our greatest weakness. So perhaps the question we should ask, or at least I'm going to ask, could be asked, can such an association of students be sufficiently self-correcting so as to be able to continue our work? Can we, in fact, as Crosby asks or stated, can we flourish on the moral worth alone of ULT? After all, it's, as Hal indicated, it's built on a radical idea, the profoundly spiritual nature of man, the thinker. I don't mean men and women, I mean the thinker, manas, us, humans. The work has survived for well over a century, but so have several theosophical organizations. So just being an association may not be the only thing that's of value. It has to have energy, it needs students. And what we need, honestly, more than anything else, is students who will work for Theosophy and work through Theosophy and whatever means we can figure out, work for humanity. I think it's fair to say that the principles that were outlined earlier, and which talked about, principles behind ULT have been pretty well established. And in fact, it'll be fair enough to say they've been proven to be valid. There's the principle of unity. We recognize that thread of the teachings, the commonality of that ancient wisdom. Study, yeah, we're pretty good at that. Look at all the study classes we hold. And work. Work on ourselves, of course, but also to work on behalf of others. And how well that works, how well work works, we would say, it really has to do with how well we put those ideas into practice. What opportunities can we provide for work, for ourselves, and for others in the future? Well, one could say that these are embedded in our practices, but perhaps maybe a better question going forward would be to ask, are our practices sufficiently embedded in our principles? So that's been the purpose of these few words, basically to ask a couple questions. And I have no definitive answers except to say that how we answer them will determine how useful ULT can continue to be as a part of the Theosophical movement. And the Theosophical movement ultimately only serves, if it serves, it has to serve humanity, what HPB called the great orphan. Because, as Hal indicated, ideas rule the world. The ideas that people hold do matter. As a fellow theosophist likes to say, he said, ethics are applied metaphysics. So in Theosophy, we're always looking for our first principles. What is the essential idea of something? Not what the surface is, not what we say it is, not what we believe, but what is the essential idea, and how best can we use that in service to others? Thank you. I think we go to our declaration at this point, do we not, Jonathan?
You wanted to read not only this slide, but the next slide after?
I forget which the next one is.
That's the thing that you sign as an associate.
Oh yes. We'll do both of them. Why not? Sure. We don't do much self-promoting at ULT, but we'll on a ULT day, I think we ought to basically tell everything we know about this, and that'll be it. Then we can ask questions. Sure.
Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore it has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following statement is signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine.
Thank you. Okay, Wes and Hal, we've got time for questions.
If there are questions or observations, certainly be welcome.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I thought, would you mind going back to the seal and explaining each element of the seal?
Want me to share that?
Yes, go ahead, please. I'd be glad to say a word or two about it. Yeah, this was the emblem adopted by the original Theosophical Society, and I believe it is in use to this day by all the theosophical groups. Its slogan here in English, "There is no religion higher than truth," kind of has become was the motto of the original Theosophical Society and has been kept with the emblem. The emblem is a combination of several symbols. Starting from the top, you have the Om, which is the sacred word, indicating our higher spiritual nature. Going around the emblem is the serpent, the Ouroboros, swallowing its tail, indicating the cycle of life. At that apex, you have the cross. It's actually an ancient symbol. In the 20th century, it became badly distorted as the swastika. But the swastika you can find on depictions of the Buddha that are over 2,000 years old in India and elsewhere. It indicates the wheel of life, that lifetime after lifetime, that's karmic wheel. The two interlaced triangles represent the Coexistence of spirit and matter. The upward pointing triangle represents the principles of spirit. The downward pointing one indicates the principles of substance or matter. They are intertwined, interconnected, and therefore inseparable. In a sense, we could say that that matter is concretized spirit, and spirit is etherealized matter. In the center, you have the ancient Ankh, the Egyptian cross, symbol of life. It's also the symbol of the teachers of any denomination and of none. It really represents that intersection of, again, of spirit and matter meeting in the middle. And the circle there above, again, I'd say representing the universe. Did you have any other specific questions about the emblem or this symbolism? Because Mr. Judge has a couple of wonderful articles on it that he published in the past, and I think are readily available on theosophical websites. And HPB writes quite a bit about these symbols in the Sacred Doctrine and elsewhere.
Thank you so much for this. Judy.
Other thoughts or questions?
Looks like Judy has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notice. I don't see everybody. Go ahead, Judy, please.
Yes, I do have a thought about what you said, that of course we're not perfect in our manifestation as an organization or a non-organization. But I had a friend in India and another friend here who just had a fit because I went to Adyar to visit. Now, their approach was different. And in 1991, they were just beginning to read Judge again after a long rift. And I went to their school of wisdom. I did learn something. Their approach was different. And at one point, I got asked if I was a member of one of those Blavatsky-oriented organizations. And I said, well, of course. It was like a Christian asking me, well, do you actually believe in the teachings of Jesus instead of just the church? Well, of course, I differed very much from that gentleman, but not everyone there was like that. There were various approaches. There were discussions of individuals such as C.W. Leadbeater and, Krishnamurti had a following, and it was quite different. But their library was quite wonderful, and I saw no harm in visiting there. I learned a lot, and I was grateful for what I learned there. So, I don't think we should be dogmatic, even though it's obvious that the teachings of Blavatsky and Judge are universal, and that they do have an inclusiveness which I don't find any of the other theosophy teachers have, except Robert Crosby, who, of course, follows them rather strictly. And it's this universality and inclusiveness and acceptance of all that I think that we need to have, and also a magnanimous view to those who disagree with us. And we really need to have that to be true to our calling. So I just wondered if you agree with that.
Oh, I have to unmute. Yeah, well, absolutely. From the first reading, we read, truth is not a man, a book, or a statement. So if it's universal, if it has an essential truth to it, or even if it's partially true, it reflects that some truth somewhere. And so we should recognize truth where we find it. It's real easy to, I suppose, get into a dogmatic statement about, what is true or whatever. Blavatsky in Isis Unveiled wrote that true philosophy and divine truth are convertible terms. So a religion which dreads the light can't be a religion based on either truth or philosophy. Hence, it must be false. And so I think we could say the same thing about theosophy and different theosophic groups. If it's true, then there has to be a truth there. And these groups serve a purpose. There are those in the various theosophical organizations that are probably more aligned with the ULT approach, if you will. And I've known people in ULT associations and lodges that would probably be much more comfortable in an organization like the Theosophical Society with a president and somebody in charge, and you have dues and so forth. So it's a matter of individual opinion and individual initiative. So I think we should recognize value and truth wherever it is. And I would love to go to India and visit Adyar. I know of several students that have done that, and it's probably you know, high on a lot of our lists, our bucket lists of useful things to do. So I'm glad you were able to go there. I think that's a good thing. If you learn something, they learn something. What's not to like? uh, Ken, go ahead, please.
Uh, yes. I'm here in the lodge there in San Diego, and I wanted to bring up the question about associating the work of B.P. Wadia, who individually started many lodges around the world, and comparing that to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is another organization that has no leader. But they do have something that ULT seems to lack, which is a general service board that are, like, quote, trusted servants, they call themselves. And they help to kind of disseminate the teachings and keep things organized and on track. And in this case, I think we have a pretty clear idea of what the teachings are, the actual source writings of H.P. Blavatsky and William Quan Judge and Crosby's, additional stuff about that. So we have some clear readings already. So the board wouldn't need to do that. The ULT analogy to the work of B.P. Wadia or the Alcoholics Anonymous General Service Board. But I'm wondering what the people here in the audience think of maybe moving in the direction of creating something like a general service board that might help individual lodges around the country and around the world. Because we have, from our Saturday afternoon Aquarian series, I'm aware there's people that show up on Zoom here from Japan and India and London and other parts of the world, but they may not have such an organized lodge. And I'm wondering if that could be something that would be useful to keep the ULT movement going into this current century and into the future.
Well, I think it's a great question. I'm not familiar enough with Alcoholics Anonymous to be able to speak to that. If anybody is and would like to comment on that comparison, I think you probably say more than I can about it.
I just have a question for the questioner. What service would the service board provide?
Yes. Thank you, Hal. I'm thinking that the service would be to assist any local lodge with some of the concrete day-to-day organizational things that they might be involved with, such as was mentioning, once a group expands beyond somebody's living room to then a restaurant meeting, like a Denny's or some other place, then maybe they're going to need some help either buying a building or renting a space, things along those lines. So maybe some interaction along that avenue that could be helpful for a general service board of ULT.
Okay, Laura, would you like to chime in on this?
Yes, I think Mr. Judge mentioned something about each one of us can be a center, and forming small meetings within our group communities is really an important part of ULT and has been done in many locations. And every lodge around the world stands ready as that force that Ken mentioned to help with providing publications, with literature, with suggestions, those are available. In fact, I know the UK has a booklet that is given out to people who want to start a study group. And this is really an important part of the work, is how each one of us in small ways can contribute. But I do know that every lodge that does all the publishing and provides the material stands ready to help those in their smaller centers.
Oh, thank you, Laura. I think it's a really useful reply there. The Theosophy Company, which is located in Los Angeles and does the printing for the lodge, is a resource as well. And students have often written there for with questions, but they could also write to other lodges. And you mentioned, London, and if they have a useful booklet for those wanting to start a class, I think it would be a wonderful resource to share. But every lodge, there needs to be both the initiative locally as well as many helping hands as possible. So if we hear of such efforts, I would say share the wealth, share the inquiry, direct questions to one of the longstanding lodges and see if assistance can't be obtained that way. There are many. I would just caution. We just want to say, as Hal asked, what would be the function if we really needed to have something like that? It could be developed. Nonprofits have been developed. There are issues with owning a building. If who is responsible for it once the person that loans it or donates it, to whom do they donate it so that it can be there for the next generation or the next set of classes or next year. So there are practical matters that have been worked out over decades, and sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it takes an additional initiative of some sort, and there's nothing in principle against that sort of an entity if it were needed. Someone could create something like that if there were a need. But we do have several active lodges around the world, and inquiries to many of them would be probably met with open arms and perhaps some useful guidance. Ken, is that essentially your question? Because you'd mentioned BP Wadia, which we didn't say anything about today, but which was mentioned earlier in an earlier meeting.
Yes. One thing that I understand historically that Wadia did is that through his own personal energy and effort would go around visiting different lodges. And I've actually never really visited another lodge. I did go to the Los Angeles Theosophy Hall once, but there wasn't a meeting happening. I happened to just talk to somebody there. The idea with Alcoholics Anonymous is that there are periodic meetings throughout the seasons, maybe once a year or so, of something called the General Service Board, and it would be like an informal organization of members from different lodges that would meet periodically to kind of talk about what they're doing in their lodge with each other. So that could be like an intermediate level, and perhaps either the London Lodge or the Los Angeles Lodge could be something analogous to the General Service Board. That would be like an overarching leaderless group that of trusted servants that would help kind of coordinate the activities of the different lodges so we could have better communication with each other. I think it's part of it. And then with that better communication, the next goal would be to further disseminate the teachings, especially to younger people, because I believe there's a huge hunger for spiritual growth and development in different younger generations of people that are here on Earth. Thanks.
There's a really good suggestions, Ken. And when an individual sees an idea and tries to put it in practice, it's usually good to get input from others and see if you can't get something started. If there is a need, if you hear of a need, share it. And if something like the AA folks have, develops out of it that might work out, or it might become a function of a casual or an informal effort on behalf or by several individual students. So again, we have a single document, the declaration that lays out some principles, but the application is really up to students. And if there's a need for a different kind of an entity, as there was, well, for example, when they wanted to build a building in Los Angeles 100 years ago, they thought, well, what are we going to do about this place? Once we get it built, so they had to make a publishing company that was, had to be able to hold title to it. And that's not ULT. It's a function of students. So functions of students should be developed where there is a need. So
Wes, I can mention one thing. We're
Sure.
past your time, but why don't we take this last question from Shobha?
All righty. Go ahead, Shobha. Thanks,
Hi,
Jonathan.
hi, everybody. Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation, both of you. My question is, I remember when I was younger, when we started with the study group and then became a lodge in India, in Delhi, we used to have these pamphlets that had a list of international ULT lodges. Do we have this on our websites in Universal Theosophy and other places? I'm not sure. I would be really okay, good. Thank you. Because that was very useful for people who travel or who need, suppose somebody goes somewhere and they know where the lodges are. Thank you. I'm glad it exists. Because the ones that existed at that time, many of them have gone, I think. The list that we used to have. So I was just curious if we have updated lists.
Great question, Shobha, and thank you. Yeah, I think that the website, the ULT in Los Angeles, has a page for each of the lodges. And if there are lodges or study groups or meetings or anything that is active and isn't listed there, there's room for everybody and it can grow. So, please go to the website and hit the contact us button and let them know that there's an active lodge or a study group or some theosophic work that should be included. And there's a page for each of the existing lodges that we know of. As far as I know, we have them all. So that's a great question.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, both of you, Wes and Hal.
Yes.
And the heart quality really came through, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of us resonated to these universal revolutionary approaches to disseminating theosophy. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. And thank you for hosting, and thank everyone for attending and listening and being patient and your questions and comments. And thank you for the readings as well. Appreciate that and the help, Jonathan.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Wes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Our next meeting at the Aquarian series will be on the topic of the symbolism of the ear. So it'll have to do with sound and listening, I suppose.
I look forward to hearing that one.
All right. Thank you. Hearing. Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy solstice.
Happy solstice.
Thanks, Hal.
Happy
Thank you,
solstice.
Liz.